I don't know that I was interested in computers to begin with, because when I was a child, I don't know how long it was before I knew there was something called a computer, right, growing up. So I grew up in, a middle class family in a middle class neighborhood in India, which probably gave me the best upbringing I could have, because from an early childhood, it was very clear that education was the way forward for me, for my brother, my sibling, my cousins, and all that. But one thing growing up, I think that got me interested in language, if you will, which is where my journey begins into computing. It begins with language. The thing that got me interested in language is that we were a multilingual family, because here was a Tamil-speaking family in the middle of Marathi-speaking Pune, right, the cultural capital of Maharashtra. Marathi is the local language, in a Marathi neighborhood. And I was going to a school that made me learn 3 languages, Hindi, English, and Marathi. And at home, I was speaking Tamil. So it wasn't long before I started thinking, me, my brothers, we would notice, gee, I wonder why in Tamil we say something that translates into English as here come, but in English the order is come here. And so before we even realized that what we were getting interested in is language, we were actually getting interested in language as a science, as to what are the shapes of these utterances, why do these word orders change, why is one word order more natural in one language than another. And that's where I think some of that inquiry started, that took me to where I am today, working in speech, language, computer vision, and these fields, which we now associate with the field of computing. First, I came to the US to study. I then did a summer internship in the handwriting recognition group while I was a graduate student at IBM's Watson Research Center. That's what really got me interested in the image and image aspect of language, if you will, in terms of handwriting recognition. Anyway, I then went and joined BBN Technologies, which is kind of the storied internet and speech and language pioneer firm in Cambridge, which is where I started working. I started working as a scientist, and I was working on, believe it or not, OCR, recognizing printed text on documents. But the thing was, we were applying speech recognition techniques to the problem of OCR. Back then, people were doing very complicated rule-based systems. You needed to know the language, the script, in order to write these complex rules that would help you recognize these documents. And we wanted to bring to it the simplicity of speech recognition, where you could just train your statistical learning system to learn how to recognize this language as it was in written form, and then we recognized it. Anyway, from there, that fact that we were using speech recognition techniques for it led to a natural interest in speech recognition. So I started working in speech. You're working in speech recognition, and I've always been drawn to applications. So I was quickly looking into what are the applications of speech recognition that are emerging, what's interesting. And back then, this was now the late 90s, call center technology was becoming big, and speech recognition in the call center was becoming. So I got drawn into that, and I did a fair number of years doing interesting work in call center technologies. In fact, I led the speech engineering team that did the first 411 deployment for a telco at the time who had contracted to us. And then that led to other things in speech and language understanding, etc. But then there was always this attraction that text and images had for me. So after that phase, I said, I want to go back to those roots. So I went back to starting working in video, OCR of text and video. That led to a greater interest in video and computer vision. So I never studied computer vision formally as a graduate student, but that's what got me interested in computer vision. So sooner or later, I was certainly working on all these different aspects, different problems that all together comprise the field of AI, or at least the applications of the field of AI and machine learning. And then by the late 2000s, we at BBN were acquired by Raytheon. And I was there for 4 more years after the acquisition. At that point, I started feeling like I wanted to go back to doing much more exploratory research, kind of explore new areas, and also kind of go into the next phase of like my career, if you will, kind of do something new. And serendipity at the time, USC reached out, and they were looking for somebody to lead ISI. And this is a small world. There were some DARPA programs that I was the principal investigator for at BBN, on which folks at ISI like Kevin Knight and Daniel Marcoux were our partners on that program. So not only did I know of ISI because of its reputation, but I actually knew people at ISI, and I respected them, and I thought they were phenomenal researchers. And so when this opportunity came in, I was intrigued. I said, I got to learn more about it. So January 2013, I remember coming to LA for my first meeting with Dean Yanis Yortsos, and walking through the campus. It was probably one of those days when the students were just coming to campus, and stalls were set up, and there was just this vibrancy around it. And just walking through the campus to talk with Yanis and then head out to lunch with a couple of people, I was, from that point on, it was basically, I think the decision was made in that first visit, like, man, I can see myself really happy and productive here. This is a very vital, energizing atmosphere. And then took a few more months, we went through the process, and then I came to ISI. So that's kind of the story of how I came to USC and ISI. Before I joined ISI, I remember I gave a talk at ISI before I formally joined and accepted. And at that meeting, there were a lot of questions because one of the things, other than whether you just know research and whether you know the atmosphere at ISI, places like ISI that have been around for 3 or 4 decades and that have been founded and that have been grown, and there are people here who have been there since the very early founding days, they're attached to whatever is this undefined quality called culture. And there are some attributes to these organizations that are core cultural attributes. Sometimes they can be as simple as, we leave our doors open and anybody can come and go at any point in time, to something much more tangible. And there were a lot of questions at that meeting around how I would approach different situations, etc. It was a nice exchange. I think in that meeting, there was a fair amount of satisfaction that, the guys from industry, it's going to take him some time to learn about us, right? But he seems willing to learn about us, right? And so I sensed at that meeting an acceptance that this could be a good partnership for all of us. And I said, you know what, that's great. I love an organization where they care enough about the organization, because these are the people I'm going to work with. These are the people who are going to grow and strengthen this organization. And people who don't care about the organization are not going to be able to invest their time and passion in growing it. So to me, it was fantastic to see these people like really asking all these questions and saying, how are you going to, what if you change our culture? I said, okay, there's something here people want to preserve, which means they then want to grow and make it more impactful. And so that was kind of the interaction. So yeah, there was some initial concern, perhaps skepticism for sure, about what it could be. But there was also an acceptance that we do need some new thinking and some new leader coming in, and this guy looks like he's willing to learn from us. In funded research, there is often this sense people have that you have to do what the sponsor wants you to do, and that you don't have the freedom to do the research you want to do. And I've actually never believed that. What I've believed is you want to do what you want to do. And the world of sponsors is massive. There are definitely sponsors out there who have problems that match your research interests. So to me, my vision was, here's this institute with this really diverse set of talents and the opportunity to grow more talent. It's got this context of one of the world's top research universities, which has even more talent and even more diversity of talent resident in it. What's more, there's all these students coming in, the graduate students, who want to solve new problems, who are exploring new areas. And so to me, my vision was, how do I harness all of these different factors here? The talent resident at ISI, the reach back that it has into the immense resources of a university like USC, the talent pool that comes to the organization every year in the form of new PhD students and postdocs. And so my vision, we take those and we define a model in which sponsors can get unique value out of this combination of professional researchers at ISI, the very classical academic faculty, and these PhD students who are the ultimate risk takers, right? They're willing to spend 6 years on a really hard problem and starting off those 6 years with that 6-year journey without being sure that this is a solvable problem. And so my vision was, bring all of these together, go after the areas that we want to work in, go find the sponsors who are interested who have problems that match these research interests we have, and funding will follow. It's a relatively simple-minded approach to funded research or sponsored research. One thing to keep in mind is the US government is not a monolithic entity, right? So I think one of the first big things we did, so when I came here, for example, I don't think ISI had entertained or invested much effort in building a relationship with IARPA. So ISI played in the DARPA world, but they're not built much of a partnership with IARPA. And I was curious why. And there was a sense that it's very hard to get selected at IARPA. And in my experience, because I had some of the first IARPA-funded projects, even at BBN, in my experience, their approach was not that different. It's just that you had to understand what are the types of problems they're interested in, and then find the researchers who are interested in working in those areas, and then make the pairing. So, in fact, one of the first big proposals that I led after coming to ISI was a proposal to IARPA. And we got selected. And I still remember the immense skepticism when we were putting that proposal together, and kind of the recognition that, boy, this is doable once we got selected. And so I think just the recognition that the US government is not monolithic. It's not just the NSF. It's not just DARPA. In fact, it's not just IARPA. It's not just the Department of Energy. It's not just. I mean, there's just a lot of opportunity. So yeah, I do think of it as sponsors in that sense. But there's also the National Institutes of Health. And ISI had some work in that area. That grew. There was also all the foundations that sponsor money, that sponsor research. Right? So over time, we started getting deeper and deeper into this network of sponsors. To me, a moonshot is something that when you set out to do it, looks unachievable. Halfway there, a small sense of optimism starts growing within you. I might actually land this. And when you get there, you look back, you look at the earth, and you say, oh my God, I actually made it. Right? So problems that have that characteristic, that are exciting, that feel just at the edge of the doable, just at the edge of not being achievable, right? That kind of excite you in a way. To me, those are the moonshots. One of the areas at ISI that I believe was a moonshot, continues to be a moonshot, but one where there is more and more work growing, is quantum computing. Right? When I joined ISI, we had this D-Wave quantum computer, and that was the Lockheed Martin had funded, and that was the USC Lockheed Martin Center for Quantum Computing at ISI. And we had a small fledgling group working with that computer and developing new techniques that could run on that computer, developing tools, etc., and measurements on what's possible with that computer. Over the next several years, we actually grew that practice into quantum communications and new quantum computing research projects funded partly by IARPA and then by other agencies as well. Quantum computing remains a moonshot. We were at a point where we said, is this even doable? What problems can it solve? I think now there's more and more confidence building that this is something that will probably happen. We don't know whether it'll take a decade or whether it'll take 2 decades, but there's more investment going in, and ISI has become one of the centers of research in quantum computing. So classically, the field of AI has been, whether it's natural language understanding or speech recognition, etc. These have all been like the kind of problem areas that AI or artificial intelligence has worked in. And ISI over the years had essentially become largely focused on natural language understanding. And of course, it was recognized as the world leader in machine translation with Kevin Knight and Daniel Marcu, who were here, who were pioneers in machine translation in their own ways. But even though it had that strength and that world-classness to its AI in these few areas, the waterfront was kind of limited to that. And the way I looked at AI research and the evolution of AI going forward, it felt to me like there were 2 trends. One is that a lot of the interesting problems were at the interstices of different fields of AI, like problems at the intersection of speech and language, problems at the intersection of language and computer vision. And ISI did not have groups doing computer vision research, not have groups doing speech recognition research. So one of my ambitions was that we have to grow those areas of research. And we did. And we're now one of the leaders, and ISI is now one of the leaders in computer vision research in a number of areas of computer vision research. Whether it's face recognition, which was the first project that we got, it was a multi-year research program, to now we were looking at the manipulations in media, recognizing manipulated images, and verifying the integrity of multimedia assets, etc., etc. Another aspect of it was, I felt, application areas like forecasting that were emerging were creating new research challenges for AI and machine learning, right? So forecasting is often a time series problem, right, typically. And so what are the techniques that we need to develop, or how do we need to adapt existing techniques to this new problem area? So I wanted to get us into these new application areas as well. And the third piece to me was that you needed some kind of a solution or a capability that integrated a lot of different AI components into a useful capability that could showcase both your research advances, but also deliver useful capability to end users, right? And so we started that journey with the DARPA MEMEX program, which has now grown into this knowledge, multimedia knowledge graph-based countering of whether it was human trafficking or arms trafficking, et cetera, solution is now broadly distributed to nonprofits and such, which is led by Pedro Zeke, et cetera. But that came out of this DARPA MEMEX program that Pedro and I went after together. And so those were the 3 components, I'd say. One is expand the number of AI research areas we're going into, bring in new application focus areas like forecasting, and then also focus on not just advancing individual components, but focusing on the challenges of bringing these components together into a useful capability that can be delivered to end users. Right? That was a multi-year transformation. And that is one of the things that I'm sort of most satisfied about at ISI. Like, it's not just research for the sake of research, but it's actually delivering useful resources to society. If I look at it from one perspective in terms of a big challenge in AI and machine learning, one thing is about the scalability. And what I mean by scalability is, how do we make these technologies and algorithms and the models, et cetera, that we're creating scale to new problems and not require the same amount of work to make them work for newer and newer application areas or newer and newer problems. And to that end, I think there are a couple of directions that we're going to see get more and more work. One is this general move towards what we might call more generalizable AI. One example of this, which has now become very prevalent, is large pre-trained models. These are models that learn about a particular language or about a particular type of visual data without being trained to do something optimally by themselves, right? But then they become very powerful representational bases for us to be able to do optimally solve certain tasks, right? So, but coming back to it, I'd say one direction is generalizable AI. Another area that I think is becoming super important there is reasoning, and I'll say starting with compositional understanding, because the way for us to scale to do more with what we have is to be able to reason, bring in world knowledge or bring in common sense to achieve certain tasks. So I think these are two of the directions that I think, generally speaking, in AI and machine learning, is where we're going to see a lot of work. Within those, there's a bunch of areas that people like to focus on: specific problems, explainability, trust, etc., etc. But to me, these are things: generalizable AI that allows you to scale to new problems, and reasoning approaches that allow you to bring common sense and other sources of knowledge to solve new problems using existing resources. At its best, AI is fundamentally a democratizing influence, take, for example, conversational AI, which makes it easier. Conversational AI might start with reducing the everyday friction for people. Like, you want to do something, you can talk to an AI and it does it for you. But then there's a whole class of users for whom that is the only way in which they can access certain functionality, because they might have certain limitations, whether it's physical or otherwise. So to me, AI is about, at its best, AI is about lowering the barriers to productivity, for individuals to achieve what they want to achieve. Even simple things like machine translation. Take machine translation. Breaks down the language barrier to communication across the world. And in that sense, it brings humans closer to each other, right? And then you think about it from a speech-to-speech translation perspective. Now people who don't share a common language can speak to each other. So I think AI is a powerful force for making the world bringing the world closer to each other. If I just look at it in terms of technology, I'd have to say all the work on the early internet that far before my time is one of the biggest contributions to society. But then more recently, all the work in machine translation, all the work in detection of manipulated multimedia assets, and then the work that I just mentioned with the MEMEX program and combating human trafficking and its use in combating human trafficking, combating arms trafficking, etc. I think these are all phenomenally useful and impactful deliverables. One of the, I think, underlying truths of a research enterprise, or fundamental truths of a research enterprise, right? Ideas come from people, um, a, an environment that encourages and promotes the exploration of ideas can be provided by the organization. And leadership can create that culture where people feel free to these ideas. But the ideas themselves ultimately come from the individuals, right? And so if you want to bring in new ideas into your organization, right, there are some people who are just polymaths. They're constantly coming up with new ideas in every new field they're in. But most of us have like our areas of passions, our interests, and we have lots of ideas about those fields. And so one of the ways I've always believed that you grow, especially a research organization, is by bringing in new talent that is interested in new problems, because they'll come up with new ideas. So to me, job number one for a leader of any such organization is the recruitment of creative talent. Yeah. If you get the right talent in place and you give the right environment, everything else almost takes care of itself. Because what do you have? You have a combination of passion, you have a combination of ambition, and it's hard to beat that combination of somebody who's really interested in an area, who really wants to succeed in that area, and who's really talented in their own individual way. And so it's finding those folks. So whether it was at ISI or before, I've kind of always felt like those people bring in the vitality to organizations. So I don't see it so much as kind of a passing of the baton, as much as a continuous relay race in which there's always new talent coming in that's kind of picking up certain threads at some point and running with it, but also creating new sprints of their own, if you will, to stretch that analogy a little bit, right? And so one of my very satisfying experiences at ISI was creating programs. The university supported it as well. Once I presented the idea of creating these programs to hire talent and give them, invest in them, give them the time to create their track record in that area so that they could then go attract research funding to grow in those areas. One of the things we also did at the time was geographically, ISI had been originally in Marina del Rey, and then, maybe 35, 40 years ago had opened an office in Arlington, Virginia, which made sense because it was very close to DARPA. DARPA was the original sponsor for ISI, and the Arlington office was a natural place, few blocks from DARPA, walking distance and all of that. But talent is in many different places. And I knew from my own previous experience, a lot of the talent that resided in Boston, in the Boston area, that I thought I would like to bring to ISI, that I thought would flourish at ISI. I set up a new office in the Boston metro area, and that office has exceeded even my wildest aspirations for it in the time since we've set it up. And so what started off with in a small office with like 5 or 6 people has now grown into a flourishing operation of its own with a few dozen people working there. And in that office, we're now doing natural language understanding, we're doing forecasting, we're doing quantum communications, etc. So that offers a good way of looking at how we've expanded not just the talent, but how that talent has brought in research work in areas that they care about, and how that has enriched ISI and USC as a whole.